Oh, I've got my options open though. Let's click that off. That's terrible. And now everyone's hearing me struggle with my options. Oh, and I've still got that open. This is top quality introduction. This. Yes, there we go. Oh no, it's because I moved my mouse. Let's try again. Live, you say? Oh no. I'll worry about that later. Oh, it's gone.
Live television.
Live. Good evening, viewers, and welcome to our first Thursday evening, Boys from the Baltic Star, late night Beyond the Star. I don't know what we call Beyond the Star. I like Beyond the Star.
Beyond the Star.
Beyond the Star. I'm Luke.
Oh,
That's
sure.
We're social suggestions. With
Surely.
more creative and funny people can come up with a name for us.
Shore leave. Our whole game is just shore leave. It's just spending time in bars anyway. I'm Luke. I'm in the corner. Hello, I'm Little and I'm in the corner. That's Ewan with swanky headphones. Are you about to play Fortnite or something with those? You're about to grief some 10-year-old or something with those. and the other man and the other man is a man that's never griefed a 10-year-old. It's Ben.
Yes. Yeah. I can't take their riposte. That's the problem.
So there's a lot of aggro in 10-year-olds. I'll tell you, if you ever play one online, oh my goodness. I was like, you don't even know my mum. Horrible kid.
Oh, they're savage. As the kids would say.
They learn it. They learn it in the schoolyard. That's a good old saying. So we'd kind of vaguely planned that we could talk about Traveller, but not really giving ourselves a topic today. But we like to meet up and chat anyway, so we thought, why not make it visible for people that, if you do want to log in, if anyone is watching, the chat window is open, and there's at least a couple of us looking at it, I would imagine, and we can answer any questions. If you've got any questions you want about Traveller or the game or anything, or suggestions, then please do. I want to come up with some swanky graphics for Thursday night. Once we've got a title, I'm going to have it plastered like some kind of Conan. Not Conan the Barbarian, more like, Conan O'Brien. Like a
yeah.
Thursday night.
Yeah. Yeah, a title's important, because otherwise we genuinely have no idea what kind of show we're supposed to be doing.
Definitely. And I feel someone should write to teams and get them to put like a Cantina background option, so we can fill in.
Yeah.
A bit of sci-fi bars. Famous sci-fi bars would be a great backdrop to cycle through.
Bars of the Galaxy.
Yeah. Not Galaxy bars.
Not Galaxy bars.
The odd Milky Way.
Just a thousand small Galaxy bars as the background.
Yeah.
A word from our sponsors, yes.
Oh. God. So Ben,
yeah.
Why do we actually play? Why did you tell us that we were playing Traveller to start with? Anyway, I've always wanted to know that.
You mean why Traveller rather than Dungeons and Dragons, rather than RuneQuest or Cyberpunk or Shadowrun or any of the countless other things like Paranoia and weird things like that? Is that what you mean?
The popular ones that people actually play.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, straight to the point.
I'm throwing shade.
Okay.
I'm throwing shade at my favourite game.
So, it's a slightly long and meandering story, but it turns out we have no actual timing schedule here or anything else. So let's just go for it.
Yeah.
I started playing, and I've been trying to remember this. If I first played a role-playing game either in the very late 70s or the very early 80s, but either way, it was somewhere around 79, 80. And back then, there were very few role-playing games. And to my absolute delight, I think I'm right in saying almost all of those that existed back then, of which there were probably 7, they all still exist, I think. People are still playing RuneQuest. They're still playing Dungeons and Dragons. Lots of people, it turns out, are playing Dungeons and Dragons. And though there were many that I tried and many that I played and plenty that I've come to love, the two that I kept going back to over and over and over again were Dungeons and Dragons and Traveller. And as a youngster, Dungeons and Dragons was something you could easily play with anybody because lots and lots of people played it back then. Probably not as many as play it now, but Traveller was the one, I suppose, I really fell in love with, because the rules framework allowed you to set something literally anywhere. We used the Traveller rules to create role-playing games involving warring tribes of cavemen, and we used them to create cyberpunk scenarios, and we used them to create rip-offs of famous film franchises and television franchises that were out at the time, some of which may or may not have happened a long time ago.
In a totally different galaxy, maybe.
Far away. So what we did was we would take the skeleton rules and then put in whatever we wanted. Because we were familiar enough with the framework, we could mess with it and do whatever we liked in a way that I don't think other role-playing games of that era supported the same way. And later there were ones that did. I think GURPS came out not many years later, and you could do that. But by then I was already in love. It's it's what it is. So when I decided a few years ago to have another go at role-playing games after getting on for 40-year break ish, 30 something anyway, I thought, let's have a go at Traveller, and started digging out all my old stuff, which back then looked like this.
The little black book. You're like,
yeah.
I like it.
Is that?
I remember when we first started doing it. Yeah, you turn up with like 2 or 3 of those little things in your plastic wallet.
Well,
yeah,
our first ever sessions before
that's right.
Before social media was even a pipe dream,
yeah.
A glint in Luke's eye.
Yes. Yeah, before Luke invented Twitch. That's right.
When I didn't, exactly. when I could go 6 hours without even looking at my phone to see what's going on.
Yeah. One of the things that I must say put an absolute smile on my face when I first saw the rule books for the current version of Traveller that we're playing, which is Mongoose, is this. Hopefully this makes sense when you see it. Because if I frame that right, you can see that though the font's changed a bit, there's an awful lot of similarity in the design and in the heritage of the things. And though the rules do differ, they're quite similar in many ways. Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. I mean, so much so that some of the supplements from the original, the old one, from the late 70s and early 80s, I've been able to repurpose to build robots and things like that for our campaign.
That's pretty smart. How many of those newer books have you got? Because I've got in the core rules, I've got the beefy idiot's guide, sort of, not the connoisseur collector, I want to play a game, so I'll have it all in one go thing. But how does it work with the separate books compared to?
Okay, so I mean, just a very, very quick overview, because I'm actually not as familiar with this as I perhaps should be. You get essentially 2 of these books, one called Characters and Combat, one called Spacecraft and Worlds, and they contain all of the same rules that are in your book.
Yeah. But
your book also includes a little mini scenario, an adventure to get you started. If you buy the box set, you don't get that.
Okay.
And in place of it, you get a third one of these books containing a multi-part adventure called The Fall of Tinath.
Okay.
Which you can actually, I think, buy as a separate book now. But originally you got it with the starter set, which is the term starter set's a bit misleading, because quite often RPG companies use it to mean like an abbreviated set of the rules and literally a get started kit. But with Traveller, the starter set actually includes all of the rules and everything else you could possibly need, including a starter campaign, basically.
Yeah, because when I got my Cyberpunk Red, I got like the starter kit last year, and that was limited rules. It was only it was a little bit of the combat, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's only when the new books come out that's had the full rules. Whereas this, you're saying, is the other way around. Traveller actually comes with more than you need.
Yes, in essence, what they call the starter kit is the full rules plus a campaign, and some maps and dice and things. Which is another thing that people may not be familiar with about Traveller, but Traveller is a D6 role-playing system. So though they do ship a couple of dice in the starter kit, they'll be very familiar dice to pretty much everyone on Earth.
And if you lose them, you can just steal some from another board game that you've got lying around the house.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a role-playing gamer, I suspect you don't have any difficulty finding a couple of D6 anyway. But yes, Traveller's always used D6 as its dice, which I think was partly down to the supply problems that TSR had originally with D&D. Because when D&D was brand new, it was an absolute nightmare for them to get polyhedral dice. It really was very difficult, and they had all sorts of problems. When I bought my original D&D basic set, it didn't come with any dice. It came with a little form that you could fill in, which you could take to the shop you got the box from and hand it over to get dice when they had some.
Rational.
Speaking of dice, I just found somewhere that does a D120, which can in fact replace all of the 7-sided dice, and it will be the one dice you need for any standard 7 polyhedral dice-based game. I mean, you might need to roll it quite a few times if you have to, 6d6.
I mean, that is one problem, though I can see a different problem, which is it's basically spherical, presumably. So when you roll it, everyone's just going to be staring at it for 40 seconds, waiting for it to stop.
Yeah, I mean, it looked pretty spherical. But I assume the mathematicians among us would love a bit of divide 77 by something and round down.
That's exactly what I want to do in the middle of combat after a bottle and a half of wine when I'm quite stressed.
Maybe
worried.
maybe not for drinking social games, but if you're in an emergency and you need to pack a really small RPG kit, pencil, pad of paper, D120.
Yeah.
Actually, wouldn't a D840 be even better?
It depends what you mean by better, really.
With a D840, couldn't you also include Ds 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 12, as well as 20?
Oh my goodness.
So you would open up game designers to the option of using D5s, D7s, D3s automatically.
Yeah.
D5 sound like an abomination sent from the devil.
It does.
Quite frankly.
I'm not quite sure what it would look. I'm going to Google later what it will look like.
Oh, no, don't.
Other search engines
That's
are
upsetting.
amazing.
That's upsetting to me. Especially Ecosia. Plant some trees.
Yeah.
See, this is why I play Traveller. D6. That's it. Sorted.
Yeah,
no need for D400 and whatevers.
I also, going back to the starter set, I really like that you get the full rules in the starter set. Because I've looked at, or I've read reviews on starter sets for other systems that come with pre-generated characters, but you don't actually get the rules to generate your own character, which I think is half the fun.
Yeah.
I mean, sure, you can grab a pre-rolled stat block and come up with a backstory if you want to change the backstory, but for me, the role-playing game is half the fun is coming up with a character and some form of backstory or personality for them without having it there for you in the box.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Character development matters, and I don't necessarily mean stat development. That's fine, but it's not really that. It's actual building a heritage for your character, isn't it? And then adding to it each session.
Yeah. And coming up with those hilarious moments, which in turn turn into your backstory, but a collective backstory amongst the party.
Yeah.
Or the group of travellers that you're travelling with.
Yes, and there are going to be funny moments inherently in role-playing games, I think, because people get invested in moments and then those moments go horribly wrong a lot.
They certainly do.
like not being able to climb a ladder.
Don't even talk about ladders.
Yes, everyone has a story about something they couldn't work. Yes.
but your original character
is yours.
Yes.
But that's when we were talking about building the background. I think that's why when we sat down, it was like the first session that we started this adventure when we'd just gone into lockdown, and we'd been playing Original Traveller for a bit. You'd given us the, do you want to continue this, or shall we move on to Traveller? You know, second edition, and we'll kill off your characters in a glorious finale, which we chose, and it was a glorious finale. But then it's when we sat down at the computers and ran character generation, and like I was instantly in love with second edition, because I think I think Trevor definitely been doing it. I think you've been doing it as well. You've been. There's a website where you can run like virtual traveller setups to kind of get an idea of how it works.
Yeah, and it rolls the dice for you, and it shows you the table and tells you what you rolled.
So I think we all got an idea of kind of what we wanted the character to do. You know, I've kind of wanted an artist. I've decided. Trevor wanted like quite a tanky character. I think you'd looked at you tried a few things, military, or looking at university. And I think it's all very well having plans, but what I like also about Trevor is your plans can totally fall apart if you fail the entrance exam to the to college, or you injure yourself in something. And
yeah. I mean, the role that you choose will dictate somewhat, but it has they all feel like, if you roll for your character advancement and you get something that you didn't ideally want, it still feels as though it's tied to that sort of background, which makes sense. It should do, but it doesn't. It can throw a few curveballs your way when you're trying to develop a character. And it also means that you don't start min-maxing your stats to get the best thing that you possibly want, which is arguably a bad thing. But
I think it's actually one of the strongest character generation systems I've ever seen for the players. It does pose certain problems for the referee, it has to be said, because by the time you've come out of character generation, because of the way players are supposed to be constructed, they've created various connections between each other. They sort of know each other a little bit, and they have bits of their past in common. And if you're the referee and you've said, right, so the party's going to meet on this world, now what brings them all there? And you suddenly realize that what brings them all there has to fall in line with a network of interconnected backstories that when they came up with them sounded really good, and now you're thinking, but these two people are going to hate each other.
But that leads to some great group tension, which has its moment.
Yeah, and I suppose I did what a lot of people would do in that situation and came up with a system that relied on one person having to be there and others being there because of the connections they had indirectly through that person,
And I think Stefan's was intriguing because I'm guessing you'd told Ewan ahead of time, but having one of his characters not there and turning up later, like it was it was 3 sessions later maybe, wasn't it? Because the first session was all at the hotel, then we did at least one Moab hunting,
and
so
then
it might have
when
been
we
third session.
Yeah,
we didn't even
left
meet
the planet
Stefan.
to the space station.
Yeah, on that third session, I think.
Yeah. I mean, Ben had told me, but I don't think you'd told me how or when he was going to come in. I think he just said, "Oh, I'm going to leave Stefan for a little bit."
Yeah,
but you'll know when he comes in, or when I bring it up.
I remember sort of sending you a message or something saying, in case you didn't realise, that character who's just been introduced is in fact Stefan.
Yeah. You definitely did, because I remember that.
Because he was kind of travelling under a false identity at that point.
Yeah. Oh dear.
Yeah.
But you did manage to make it all fit though, because all our interconnections, and I like the interconnections because you also get to add a little extra stat, don't you? Like each of you come up with something you might have gained during that time together, which was cool. I thought. Help you if there was as long as we could argue it to you, which is a classic Traveller thing. If we can argue it to you, then you'll go with it. But I thought the way you tied us together.
I think Traveller's always basically been built around that concept. I don't know if it was originally written that way, but that's certainly how it's always been played. Is there's almost invariably a dozen different ways of doing something. So if you can come up with a description of how it happens that makes sense to the referee, then that's how it happens. So you can always justify, why this particular event would give you this skill, or why this particular approach would require this skill. And I think other games are more like that these days. But certainly when I first started playing Dungeons and Dragons, it was very different, because the DMG had a table for everything.
Right.
Because it was sort of intended as like a competition game or a tournament game. You had to have a table for every possible eventuality. There wasn't a lot of flexibility. But I think it's played more relaxed now for the most part. And certainly Traveller has always been like that. Well, because the books were teeny. The core rules are just 3 of those little pamphlets. Between them, they didn't add up to a single classic player's handbook.
Yeah.
And they're the entire rules, basically. So you had to be reliant on a communal way of resolving how things were done, and that's fine. I think it puts a little bit more pressure on the referee, but as long as you're all sitting around the table being happy to do that, it's great.
I think there's some fun to be had in sort of bargaining a bit with the referee. So if something happens, we're like, but surely I could use. I think Ewan did one last week. It was like, it was something about a conversation thing. It was like, could I use this instead because because of this and that? And you're like, actually, yeah. Even if it's with a bane, or even if it's you lose one of your adding intelligence or something, then it's a thing like that makes sense. So why not?
I think it helps lead the story as well somewhat, if it, or at least set the scene for the story. Say you're talking to someone and you want to use Carouse instead of Persuade, then you automatically know that you're in a light-hearted social situation, probably with a couple of drinks.
Yeah, and
or,
the rules
at least
can't
it gives
possibly
that
know the
impression.
narrative. The rules can't possibly understand where you are in the narrative. There are places where being socially adept, having a high social skill, might actually be a disadvantage. Where that you might actually not want to be using a high social as part of your persuade check, because of where you are, at the right kind of place, the right kind of time. It might actually not be helpful at all. So maybe that's a thing.
Yeah.
Definitely. So I remember when we had our initial first ye olde Traveller session, and you handed out our little character sheets. Well, our character slips, and they were a lot smaller, and there was a lot less on it. Was that just for simplicity for us, or was that literally that's how it used to be in the world?
That is how it used to be. Yeah. In Classic Traveller, that's what a character sheet looked like. You had your little 6-number value, and then a list of skills, and everything was up to you. Yeah.
Yeah. Or letters if you were lucky enough to.
If you were lucky enough to have a letter or two.
We picked characters just based on. I don't know what we did. We had no idea what the letters and numbers meant.
Yeah.
We basically based it on names.
Skills,
maybe some weapony bits, and then there was a job, wasn't there? There was like what they'd done.
Yeah.
And I was like, I like this person. They're a scout. That sounds interesting. And it's only then I was like, I've got I'm basically the super person here. That you'd rolled up 6, hadn't you, or something, and we picked 3 from the 6, I think.
Yeah.
And then so we literally went in blind.
But again, I quite like that, and I quite like the little slips of paper. Just bare minimum character sheets. It goes for the zombie apocalypse role playing. Pad of paper, pencil, D120.
Here's all you need.
A tiny little slip of paper rather than.
You're trying to make this D120 thing a thing, aren't you?
It is a thing.
It's your 2021 thing.
I bought shares in the company that makes them. Yeah.
At some point, we're going to have to do a one-shot of the Fighting Fantasy role-playing game, which is also a D6 role-playing system, but each character only has 2 stats, and all you get is like skill and stamina. And the system was originally designed for those fighting fantasy game books. You know, the numbered pages back and forth. But then they expanded it into a role-playing game. I say expanded it. They just said, here's the basic rules that we use. It's a role-playing game now.
I think I've still got a couple of those lying around the house.
Genius.
Yeah. So yeah, we could do a one-shot of that, because you want to talk about bare bones role-playing.
That'd be good. I'm also really interested in playing Paranoia at some point. I very much like the setting. Sounds really fun.
Yes.
In a dystopian comedy kind of way. I'm not sure if that's how it was played. Like when you played.
Yes, it was. It was supposed to be
people play it.
Comedy. Yes. Yes, it was sort of. The closest I can come to is if you've ever seen the film Brazil.
Cool. Yeah, a while back, but yes.
A bit like that. It was
so difficult to follow.
Yes. Well, impossible to follow, because everybody might be a traitor, and in fact, pretty much by definition, everybody is a traitor. You've just got to find out a way to prove that you're not one by fingering enough of the others that to suggest they are. And yes, it's tremendous. But one of the things I liked about it, of course, was coming from Traveller. It feels very Zodani, Paranoia.
Oh,
an environment where happiness is mandatory.
Yeah. Yeah, all of a sudden the happiness police on you.
I get the feeling it's a very fine line to tread, especially if you're running the game, between having your players betray each other at every possible moment to try and not win over, but, you know, have them lose a clone and some of their life, and trying to get them to like work as a group and get to a final point and progress. Rather than just tearing each other apart.
Yes, I don't think I'd have made the analogy back then, because I don't think such things existed, but it's like a competitive escape room where you need to collaborate for as long as it takes to get almost all the puzzles done, and then grab the key at the end yourself. It's that kind of game.
Yeah. I very much like the creation as well.
Yes.
So the I don't know whether you know, Luke, how it basically, I think the way it runs is you pick a stat that you're going to get +1 to start off with.
Yeah.
And then whoever's sitting to the left or right of you gets -1 in that stat. And then they pick one, and the person sat next to them gets -1 in whichever stat they pick. And then you go up to, once you've all had a go, you go up to +2 and -2. And so it feels as though you're screwing the person over who sat next to you.
That's quite clever, though. I like it. So that instantly, and realistically, they could have done it just so that you have to pick your +2, your +1, your -1, your -2.
Yeah.
But it sounds like instantly they've set that you're kind of against each other. That's like,
oh yeah.
Well, did you do that just to get me? Because you knew I was looking at doing that, you know. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I mean the name of the game is well chosen. Players have to start out as good friends, because there's then a fighting chance they'll still not kill each other on the way out. It is a very, very vicious game when played properly, and it does not suit what you call campaign play.
Okay.
Yeah,
not in my experience. It is definitely a one-shot kind of game.
One shot, then leave it, have a little cuddle, and then then back to something else next week.
Yeah, I mean, as long as you can actually accept that it's only a game,
exactly.
It's fine. But I have heard of people getting quite upset during games of Paranoia. Yeah.
But I do feel we should give it a go at some point.
I agree, and I do have the original first edition box set somewhere, so I will have to dig it out.
Very nice. Stuff. Yeah, definitely.
It is a classic game.
So it's been around. That must have been around a while as well, then. First edition.
Oh yeah. I couldn't tell you from memory when Paranoia launched, but if you told me it was 84 or something, I'd believe you. Yeah. In fact, if you told me it was 1984, I would literally believe you.
Chosen a bit too well.
Ironically, yeah.
Going back to that the two stats you talked about, which is the Final Fantasy. On Twitter today, they had someone post a thing of if you were coming up with stats for your life or something, name the two stats. You like two skill stats, and I think mine was, what did I choose? Achiness and patience. So you got to think of two stats. If you were running a game that could only have two stats, that summed everything up for you, what would it be?
Well, that could sum up every person in the world, basically, in just two characteristics.
Yeah, but from your central core perspective. So, of course, achiness doesn't sound... But for me, I'm always a bit achy. So, achiness and patience. Just playing a game that's based around those two stats. Okay, you're trying to jump over. You're trying to jump over this. Trying to jump over this gap in the ground. Roll for how achy you are today.
Okay, for me, it's definitely resentment and sobriety.
Do they go hand in hand?
Well, it's
as one goes up, the other goes down.
Yeah. Pretty much, yes. But as you use up your reserves of sobriety as you go through the day and get drunker and drunker because you've got to just to cope with life, you need to be increasingly resentful about things in order to overcome them, depending on how low your reserves of sobriety are.
Oh, I like it. That's quite a balance. Oh, that's quite deep.
That's good. Definitely.
Oh. How about yours, Ewan? It's not something to do with wearing shorts, is it?
Oh, it might be. It might be.
Cold legs.
Yeah, trouser length and beard length.
Trouser length and beard length.
I'm a simple man. They don't relate in any way whatsoever.
You lean over the lathe. Roll a beard length check.
Yeah, exactly.
To be fair, I mean, if you associate, as many people do, beard length with wisdom and trouser length with, I don't know, wealth, you can afford longer trousers.
So somewhere there's a world where people have trousers that are like 4 foot below their legs and sort of trailing behind them. I'm so wealthy. I'm so wealthy.
I mean, without being silly about it, if you're not literal about the trouser, what you're describing is like a dress with a train, aren't you?
That is true.
So it gets long enough to be someone of extraordinary wealth. Yeah.
Oh, so trousers, train trousers. Oh, I like it.
Yeah.
Or very wide flares.
Maybe we should each write a zine RPG based on our two stats. See what we come up with.
or combine those 6. We got 6.
We've got 6.
We got 6. There we go.
Enough for a
in
complete
fact, quite an eclectic 6 as well.
That's quite good.
Covers a broad spectrum of stats.
It really does. You could probably do enough with that. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Right. That's decided.
Have you taken a note of those, Luke? Someone write them down.
I'll watch
the
video.
Them in the chat.
I'll watch the video back. It'll need the views.
Oh yeah.
Yes, but yes, yes. We'll have to fight over what order they go in on the character sheet.
Yeah.
Yes, which is most important?
Got to be alphabetical order, surely.
Yeah, I mean that seems the fairest way.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, you can't really have any argument with the order of the alphabet. It was set weeks ago.
Exactly. Oh, that is an ongoing thing of mine. Alphabetical order. When I say to people, B isn't actually before C. That's just how it's been arranged. There's nothing that means that in the writing of a letter that B is before C. It's just how it's been organised to contain it and memorise it, I guess. There's no
Yeah.
It's the same as numbers, Luke.
Wait a second.
There's no reason that 1 should come before 2.
Look, I'm the anarchist, not
especially
you.
If you're counting downwards.
Yeah, I mean, 1 can actually be bigger than 2 for unusually large values of 1.
The square root of -1.
Don't get complex on me. Aye. So, yeah, there is that thing though, isn't there, about how many things in life are organised just by tradition rather than for any practical purpose, and we do that a lot. We do have orders in which we do things that are traditional but don't actually make any sense. The order in which we eat different types of food at meal times is completely arbitrary now. Probably wasn't at some point, but it's completely arbitrary. But we stick to it for whatever reason.
Sweet is the treat for getting you through all those savouries, especially as a kid.
Yeah.
It's something to hold over the kids.
Yes.
I think that's the only reason why it's in that order.
The purpose of ice cream is coercive blackmail.
Yeah, that is
a battle as old as time.
That is the only reason.
Or at least as old as meals came in courses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So what did you guys first think of Traveller? I mean, when you it's been well over a year now since you first encountered it. Admittedly, that was the classic version back then, but what was your sort of first experience? What did you think about it when you saw it?
I very much enjoyed it. I'd done a reasonable amount of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons before, and I think I played one game of Scum and Villainy, which is another sci-fi based. But going off of that, I knew that I was quite eager to try something that wasn't high fantasy, just to get a bit of a broader spectrum.
Yeah.
And it's fun, it's a fun setting. There's a lot more, I won't say there's a lot more opportunities, but there's a lot of different opportunities in a setting such as Traveller or sci-fi. Yeah, and I like the system. It was pretty straightforward. Even, the first time we played, I think you explained a lot of, not of the in-depth rules, but, we sort of knew roughly what sort of numbers we had to hit and what our stats meant. And the fact that if we were rolling something, we just rolled 2d6. And yeah, it was simple enough to pick up. I think obviously the explanation probably helped. I'll flatter Ben for tomorrow.
So do, yeah. Just warm him up a little bit.
Always worth doing that.
And it was a really nice change as well. I think you've got to soak up as much as you can if you want to enjoy these things and get better at it, get better at role playing. Then play as much and play in as many different settings, and particularly one. I mean, I'm not saying it did make me uncomfortable, because it didn't, but if you can play in settings that make you uncomfortable, it makes you think about things a lot more and process how you're playing or what you're doing when you're playing. I think that goes a long way.
Yes.
But no, I really enjoyed Traveller. It's good.
Yeah, good.
And I still do.
Thank goodness for that. See, I love it. I remember going back. Probably, when was it? Just after I came back from Japan? Yeah, so it'd have been about 2012, 2013, and I went into Waterstones. And I was like, right, I'm going to go to the fantasy / sci-fi section, which in Canterbury Waterstones used to be in the back corner. It's all been changed around since then. And I was like, I'm going to pick a new series that I want. I'm going to read through a series of books. It'll either be a fantasy series or a sci-fi series. I'll decide what takes me. And very quickly I realised I enjoy fantasy, and there's a lot to be had from fantasy. I'm a big fan of the Rangers, a big fan of the Rogues, a big fan of the Bards, big fan of the Skyrims, big fan of all, your little goblins. But there was no question. I picked a Peter F. Hamilton series up for the Commonwealth Saga, and I was like, this is for me. And especially over the last 10 years, everything I've loved, like cyberpunk, hard sci-fi, even like your space operas, Farscape, Star Trek, Babylon 5 for my crimes. It's just like It's just, there's something about sci-fi for me that's exciting, and I think it's the scope of it, and
Yeah.
I think the strength on Traveller is it doesn't let you down on the scope, which I think is probably the biggest praise I can give it. It can, like you said earlier, it can be all of those things. It can be
Yeah.
utterly planetary based. You could run a whole game based on a planet which is very cyberpunky with a moon and this and that and like high levels of the lore because there is like the stats for the planets. You could run a space opera. You could be what's his name on Mars?
John Carter.
John Carter. Yeah, John. You could be John Carter on Mars. You could be.
Yeah.
You could be June. You know,
Sure.
with war and factions over a planet. You could be Star Trek. You could literally be on a ship, explore, just going to the referee. We're going to go to this planet for a bit, and the referee will cotton on. He'll be like, right, let's. This is the monster of the week. This is the issue of the week because you play to the group, don't you? And so, and I think that's what I liked about it. 2 sessions in, our first session we had meeting the guy, took off, and then I think we landed at that little refilling station.
Yep.
And Trev at the time was like, I'm going to lay a grenade.
Yes.
It just by our door. And then the 3 of us were like, we're just going to go into the bar. And we all approached it in very different ways. And even in this tiny little place you'd set, the setting means you can do anything really, which is true of all role play, I guess. And it would be on, isn't D&D, you know, you can do whatever you want really. But for me, sci-fi just, because of the scale of it, there's a bit of freedom, I guess, if that makes sense.
And you can do different things each. You know, if you're hopping from planet to planet, you could come onto a really low tech planet where you are essentially playing in a high fantasy world without so much of the sorcery.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, you've had planets where you're involved in politics, and planets where you're just having fun, and planets where you're, hunting monsters and all sorts of things. The one that the description, and I wish I knew who'd said it originally because I would love to be able to credit them right now, is that the thing about a science fiction game like Traveller is that it encompasses everything else, whereas something like Dungeons and Dragons doesn't. In other words, at the end of a day, on your spaceship in Traveller, your party could get together around the table and play Dungeons and Dragons. But that can't happen the other way round. Because the characters in Dungeons and Dragons can't be playing Traveller. It wouldn't make any sense.
Yeah.
But actually, the characters in Traveller could play D&D at the end of the day. And yeah, I always think that's actually quite a good description of the sheer scale of it. But obviously, you do have to then accept that for it to have that scale, you've got to be willing to explore and to try different worlds and see different things. Whereas there's a sense to which fantasy comes with so many pre-built tropes of monsters and quests and adventures that you can sort of more easily find an example of exactly what you're looking for out there. It requires a bit more work, perhaps, if you're hunting around the universe for what you're looking for, rather than that'll probably be in the magic castle on the hill, right? It's a different it's a different kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, so hang on, I'm just going to ping a graphic up if I can turn my mouse on. The bottom one, isn't it? It was so it's where I could have kept that one on the whole time, to be honest. It puts our Twitter up. It's the little location thing in the bottom of the screen I have up, which it's centered on Austin at the moment because that's where we are, and it's got 2, 4, kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 systems.
Okay.
Empty space and some shipping routes and that at the bottom, centered on Austin. And like you say, that is just one sector. That's it. Like half of the De La Brue. I think De La Brue's a sector of like 20 planets or something. Cause it's like the capital of a sector or something, isn't it? I think
a subsector.
A subsector, yeah. So, and we've been to De La Brue, Austin. We heard of Hebratic because that was where the 3 guys were going, right? But we never went there.
That's right.
So we're sort of getting these names, and so we are travelling around quite a lot of space. But I do quite like that we can travel a lot, but still be relatively local for a period of time. So you get used to the names. You know that De La Brue's there. We know that if we go back there, what it's going to be like. We've heard of Hebratic. But
Yeah.
we also know that you could ping us off 6 parsecs away or whatever it was into the rift, into the unknown. And
Yes, and I should point out, I mean, the campaign you guys are playing right now is mostly me, but bits of it I've stolen liberally. One actual module from Mongoose, the second edition Traveller Rules publisher, and little bits of other adventures from the classic Traveller canon that I played when I was, much younger. And little bits of the things you've done have been stolen liberally from other people's work, sort of assembling little stories and things for you to go for. And I still am amazed that I missed Osin completely in my preparation cycle. That genuinely still shocks me.
the most perfect planet for the Baltic Stir.
Yeah.
High tech,
literally.
high-tech low police.
Yeah. Literally, I
wouldn't wanna
sort
go
of
there?
looked at the 3 or 4 worlds you were likely to jump to next, and I'd prepared all of them except Osin. Because when I first looked at Osin, I thought, well, they won't go there, so we won't worry about it. And then, of course, when I read the descriptions of where they were to you, it's like, they're going to pick Osin, aren't they?
At least we picked it at like 1:30 in the morning. It gave you like, we're going to finish there.
Yeah, so it was literally that.
Go away for a week and
we're going to call it there because I literally have no idea what Osin looks like. Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, you scrabble away and then you desperately design a world, one that makes sense, with actual geography and factions and industry and things like that. You've got to start from scratch, basically. Because if there is a published official definition of what Osin looks like, I haven't seen it.
I've noticed that there's a number of books, and I see news every now and again of a new subsector or something, how getting a book to chart it a bit. So I'm guessing there's some out there, but even then, you could recreate your own off the stats. There's no reason to say you must follow the book.
Yeah. I mean, I have a box set, a Mongoose box set called The Great Rift, which contains rough descriptions, I think, of something like 4 or 5 sectors. So whatever that is, maybe as many as 80 subsectors, something like that.
Oh, wow.
But within that, I think I'm right in saying only about 3 or 4 systems are actually described in detail. The rest are just basic, UPP, UWP, whatever they call them, the profile numbers, those strings of characters, and then in a handful of cases, a little paragraph about important landmarks or things of that nature. So you do have to fill in an awful lot of blanks. But actually, that's kind of how I prefer to do things anyway. I'm always worried if there's a published guide in detail, if it goes much beyond a 3 or 4 session scenario, I'm going to forget things, and then I'm going to overrule things that I shouldn't overrule, if you know what I mean.
I guess if you've made it up yourself as well, I mean, it depends on what kind of learner you are, I suppose, but you're more likely to remember if you sat down there and planned it out rather than read through however many pages of a book. I certainly would be. I mean,
yes,
I'm sure there are people out there that prefer to learn through reading.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's easier to make up your own, but there is a problem in that they all kind of have to make sense to you, so they do get a bit samey. So what I do tend to do is steal liberally from other people's work, ideas that I wouldn't necessarily have come up with, and then drop them into the campaign as seamlessly as I can manage, and hope that everyone goes, "Oh, that was really clever. That was neat. We didn't expect that."
Yeah.
It's like,
how did you come up with that? You must have spent all week coming up with that. Bit of genius.
Yes. Yeah. So I do tend to do that quite a lot.
But I think that's. Sorry, go on.
No, you say first. I was going to go.
I was just going to say, I think that's what most people who role play do. You write what you know, don't you? I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, you you absorb films, books, media of a certain subject, and that dictates how you tell a story in a similar fashion, I guess.
Yeah, and I tend to be very character based, so a lot of the narrative tends to be from people you'd meet. But a lot of the people, certainly writing traveller campaigns back in the day, a lot of those modules were sort of exploring the far reaches of space, and it wasn't about the people at all. It was about ancient temples and weird rock formations and that kind of thing. So if you encounter those kind of things from me, they're mostly stolen from somebody.
The carvings. The carvings.
Yeah, well, that's
Still
actually
haunts
a
me
published Mongoose
to
module.
this day.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. That does feel a bit Rift-like. We'll go after. The carvings is a bit like one of those main missions in a video game where it's like Fallout 4. It starts with you go into a bunker, you're sort of frozen, and you sort of wake up to see your son getting taken away. So you're defrosted, and you're like, I need to find my son. I need to find my son. But then you start doing side missions. Yes, I'll find your 3 dogs. Yes, I'll pick some grass for you. Yeah, but your son. Oh no, it's okay. I'll help you build your house. No, it's all right.
I've got time.
Yeah, it's the same. The carvings. It's in the Rift. No, it's okay. We'll sort something on Austin first. Don't worry.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah. There's this really important trade unionist on Austin. We've got to deal with him first.
Yeah, that's got to be done. That's very important. Got to support the union.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, and the reality is, of course, there are things that you're going to want to decide you want to accelerate towards because they're particularly exciting or interesting to you, and others you want to put on the back burner. And hopefully there's enough flexibility that it can kind of happen at whatever pace interests you.
But it's nice to have the thing on the burner because there's always that thing where you've done what you've done. If you don't quite know what you're going to do next, or you've got no, and I don't mean in a negative way, if you've got nothing better to do, it's nice to have something throbbing along. You're like, okay, yeah, let's move on to the next step. Because then that next step will trigger off another firework of this, that, and the other. And then that underpins it. And all these things are done in a couple of weeks or a month or a couple of months. And that thing is the thread that you know is going to last years, theoretically, that you're going to get there eventually. And there's no rush. It's not like we're against the clock, is it, really, in life?
No, so, it's only a clock if you artificially supply one.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's very much like real life. You have these big goals that are going to take a little while, and along the way, you have other things that you wish to accomplish in a shorter time period. It adds a bit of depth, I think, to the world and to us as characters, and
I mean,
makes it more realistic.
Part of what I think makes characters work well is the fact that they've got a backstory that contains some real depth. And that doesn't just mean, we went on this quest and we had to do this, and we went in a straight line. You have to have little asides and detours that you take. Otherwise, you're not really building character. You're just following the dots, which is just not the same thing, I don't think.
No, and I don't think it's realistic. 'Cause in real life, even the most straight-ahead person will still get drawn to something that actually affects them, something that comes out of nowhere, surprises them, or it's linked to someone in their family or a close friend or something. So yeah I think definitely it's good. I look forward to all our ongoing adventures. and me and you, and throwing you curveballs left, right, and centre, especially when you've thrown us curveballs. It's important that we then plot to make life complicated.
Yes, the difference is it's my responsibility to confuse you. It's just annoying when you do it to me.
Yeah, that's true. We're just being dicks about it, aren't we?
Yeah. I must confess, the very last episode we did, I got to the end of it and I thought, I didn't predict a single thing they were going to do. I had no idea where they were going or who they were talking to. Couldn't work it out at all.
But you went with it. You went with it.
Yeah.
And all power to you.
And we haven't planned it that way, I don't think.
No,
We might have done, but I don't think
we had
it wasn't intentional.
the list of who do we most want to, who do we like most trust, who do we most want to talk to, support, kind of thing. But of course, that's still within the world and the timings. And that we knew nothing that there was going to be the festival at the end of the next day. So that puts a point on it. And of course, because we're not doing it over 6.5 hours around a table, we are doing it over 2 hours and not wanting to discuss for too long in case the 4 people that are watching get bored. And so
yes, our units of fans.
Yeah, exactly. So I think a little bit of pre-planning on our part of knowing what each other are thinking, I guess, is a little bit helpful, especially when you thrust such curveballs.
We wanted a main direction, I think, didn't we? That we were both aiming towards, and
our thing was this is our main direction, and then we can trust that the other person is pushing in that direction, if that makes sense. There was no micromanaging. There was or
at least make our decisions without knowing that we're not deciding something that the other person definitely doesn't want to do.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. We had more confidence. I think. Well, I certainly did. I had more confidence in just doing what I felt my character would do, because I knew that it wasn't going completely the opposite direction to what Luke wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, actually, that felt as if you guys were working as a fairly coordinated group all the way through. That you actually had a plan, you had an approach. I suppose this is probably a lockdown mechanic, really.
Yeah.
In the sense that I didn't have as much forewarning as usual. If we're all sitting around the same table, I'd have a little bit more forewarning of what you're planning to do.
Although we do like to wait until you've gone for a smoke or the toilet, and it's like,
well,
hey,
yes, yeah, obviously, try.
She's coming back. He's coming
shocked
back.
expression out of the referee is clearly part of the fun. Yes. Yeah.
I'm going to stop the official stream there, if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
Just because it's keeping to our times, I guess. Really.
Oh yeah, cool.
We can carry on after dark. A little bit, although I know
after hours drinking session, yes.
Although Ewan has got work in the morning, I think. But thank you everyone for tuning in. If it was now, or if it's later, or if it's in a week's time or a month's time when I put it as a highlight. Thank you, and any comments and so on is appreciated. @Boys Baltic on Twitter, and send Ben lots of fan mail. Thank you. Goodbye.